Usually when we find ourselves dealing with a medical diagnosis, there's this underlying expectation of precision,
Oh, absolutely. We crave that certainty.
Right. It feels almost like structural engineering. Like you break your arm, you go to the hospital, the x-ray goes up on the light board, and there's that jagged white line in the radius bone.
Yeah, and the doctor just points to it and says, there is the problem.
Yeah,
It's totally visible.
exactly. It's visible, it's measurable, and honestly, it provides this profound psychological comfort.
It really does. I mean,
Yeah.
human beings are, at our core, pattern-seeking creatures. We want our reality to be neatly categorized.
Definitely. Like when you walk into an intensive care unit.
Yes. You look at the EKG monitor,
Yeah.
and you see that little green line spiking across the grid. You hear the rhythmic beep.
Beep, beep, beep.
Right. And you can point to that digital screen, look at the family, and say, that person is alive. We have proof of life.
But, and here is where it gets tricky, the moment you step outside that sterile hospital room and you walk into the realm of philosophy or theology or even just like deep existential self-reflection, that x-ray machine just shatters.
It completely falls apart. You're suddenly looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
It's so murky, and that is exactly the question we're bringing to you today in this deep dive. Is that green spike on an EKG monitor really the full, exhaustive definition of what it means to be alive?
That is, well, that's the ultimate diagnostic gray area, isn't
It
it?
really is.
Because if you only look at the monitor, you are failing to ask the secondary, far more terrifying question.
Which is?
Is there a fundamental difference between a machine that is simply, plugged into the wall and drawing power, and a machine that is actually executing the complex task it was engineered to perform?
I mean, I look at my toaster sometimes and wonder the exact same thing.
That's a great way to put it.
But jokes aside, that tension between merely functioning and truly fulfilling a design, that is the core of our exploration today.
It's a massive topic. It really is. So, welcome to this deep dive. For the next hour, we are taking on the heaviest question a human being can possibly ask, which is, what is life?
And we have some incredible source material to help us navigate this.
Yes, we do. We are using a brilliant framework laid out by Ozair da Silva Mota in his work, Analysis Biblico-Scientificus, Biblical Scientific Analyses.
Specifically, we're focusing on Chapter 10, which explores the concepts of life and living.
Right. And what makes this specific analytical framework so compelling is that it refuses to stay in one academic lane.
It really does. It intentionally forces a collision between two vastly different lenses.
Yeah. On one hand, you have the strict, observable, mechanistic lens of biological science.
And on the other hand, you have the profound, eternal, and frankly, deeply uncomfortable lens of biblical theology.
It is uncomfortable. And the mission for you, listening to us right now, is to subject your own daily routine to both of these lenses.
Because here's the trap we all fall into, right? Everyone listening to this audio has a pulse.
You're metabolizing right now. Exactly. You're metabolizing.
Yeah.
But if we strip away the ego and look honestly at our routines, the gap between merely existing and actually living is massive.
It's huge. It is the easiest thing in the world to conflate existence with living.
You can spend 80 years successfully not dying and yet never actually live.
Ooh, that's heavy. I want to push back on the biological side of this right out of the gate, just to set the stakes for you.
Go for it.
So if we define life purely by the strict laws of biology, like if life is nothing more than a thermodynamic equation of calories consumed and energy expended,
And cellular division.
right, and cellular division, then technically speaking, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, a philosopher writing a masterpiece, and a microscopic amoeba floating in a puddle of rainwater, they're all engaged in the exact same fundamental endeavor.
That's a sobering thought. But scientifically, you're not wrong.
Right. We're all just meat machines fighting off entropy. So I have to ask, is your life just this cold biological math?
Or is there something else operating inside the framework of your biology that demands a higher trajectory?
That tension is exactly where we have to start.
So to unpack this, we really need to build from the ground up. We're going to establish the baseline of cellular biology first.
Like what it actually takes to keep the machine running.
Exactly. Then we will look at how ancient civilizations, specifically through Hebrew and Greek linguistics, recognized that the biological definition was completely inadequate.
They had distinct language to separate existence from vitality, right?
They did. And from there, we'll follow this thread into the daily economics of our individual purposes, and eventually we will carry this logic all the way to a theological final judgment.
Okay, let's lay that scientific baseline first. Let's put the theology aside for a second and look purely at the science of the physical machine.
Okay, pulling out the science textbook.
Yeah, we're not just talking about the basic checklist you learn in early science classes, eating, breathing, making babies.
Right, we're talking about the mechanics of existence. Biologically speaking, what is happening that allows us to call something alive?
To elevate this beyond a basic textbook definition, you really have to look at life through the lens of thermodynamics.
Oh, the second law of thermodynamics.
Yes. In physics, there is the second law of thermodynamics, which states that everything in the universe is naturally moving toward entropy.
Toward chaos, disorder, and eventual decay, like how a rock crumbles into dust.
Or iron turns into rust. Left alone, systems break down.
But biological life is the miraculous, localized reversal of that law.
It is a rebellion against chaos.
Exactly. Biologically, life is a state of continuous, incredibly complex activity that maintains order within a system. We call this metabolism.
Right, so your cells are constantly taking in external matter like nutrients and oxygen.
And they're burning them in microscopic chemical fires to create a molecule called ATP.
And that energy is then used to repair broken proteins, fight off invasive bacteria, and duplicate DNA with astonishing precision.
So life, scientifically, is the ability to react to stimuli, to adapt, to grow, and to reproduce, all while fighting a never-ending war against the universe's demand that you break down and decay.
So if I wake up in the morning, eat a bowl of oatmeal to fuel that ATP production, and blink to lubricate my eyes when the air is dry.
Which is a reaction to a stimulus.
Right. And if I successfully manage to keep my internal body temperature at 98.6 degrees despite it being freezing outside, I am succeeding biologically.
You are a highly functioning pocket of negative entropy.
I love that. A pocket of negative entropy.
From a purely empirical standpoint, you are an absolute marvel of biochemical engineering, successfully maintaining continuous activity.
But here's the critical pivot in the framework we are exploring. Modern science looks at that successful metabolic process and says, mission accomplished, you are alive.
But ancient texts and languages looked at that exact same metabolic process and said, that is just the bare minimum requirement.
That is not the entirety of life.
Exactly. And this is where language becomes a really fascinating diagnostic tool. In English, we have one word, life.
Yeah, we use it for a blade of grass, for a dog, for a human being, and for the span of a career.
It is an incredibly impoverished word when you think about it.
It really is. But the ancient Hebrew language, the language of the Old Testament texts, viewed this very differently. The framework highlights the Hebrew word hay.
Hay, spelled H-A-Y. It's fascinating because it doesn't just act as a binary label for not dead.
Right, it carries a qualitative weight.
Yes, in its plural form, hayim, it represents the state of life as the absolute overwhelming opposite of death. It isn't just the absence of dying, it is a forceful, active presence.
I want to dig into how this word was used because there is a detail here about fluid dynamics that completely changed how I view this.
Oh, the water analogy is so good.
Right. When the ancient Hebrews applied the concept of hay to water, they didn't use it to describe a puddle, no matter how much biological algae was growing in it.
No, they didn't. When applied to fluids, hay means a current. It translates to living water.
Think about the physics of a mountain stream versus a stagnant pond.
The stream is hay because it has kinetic energy. It is moving, it is carving through rock, it is aerating itself. It's dynamic.
And the ancient Hebrew mind looked at that and saw the essence of life.
Conversely, the stagnant pond, even if it is full of microscopic organisms, leans structurally toward death because it is static.
Yeah. The stagnant water lacks the dynamic flow. And, the implication for human existence here is just staggering.
It really is. You can have a perfect metabolism, you can have perfect blood pressure, and a flawless EKG.
But if your existence is entirely static,
if you are just sitting in the same mental and spiritual puddle day after day, not moving, not growing, not affecting the landscape around you.
You are biologically viable, but you are lacking hay. You lack the current.
Wow. Yeah, you lack the current.
I find myself looking at my own schedule when you say that. Like, how many of my days are just me maintaining the puddle?
It's a tough mirror to look into.
It is. But if the Hebrew gives us the metaphor of the river, the Greek language of the New Testament gives us the philosophical scalpel.
The Greeks were obsessed with categorization.
They really were. And they split our flimsy English word life into two completely separate concepts, bios and zoe.
This linguistic split is the absolute linchpin of the entire framework. Without understanding this, the rest of the theological analysis just falls apart.
Okay, let's dissect bios first.
In ancient Greek, Bios refers to what we might call extensive life. It is the span of your days.
It is your livelihood, your means of sustenance, the daily maintenance of your physical reality.
It is quite literally where we derive the word biology, the study of the physical machine.
Right. Bios is the collection of resources and actions required to fight off that entropy we talked about earlier.
It's paying your mortgage, it's grocery shopping, it's getting 8 hours of sleep. It is the necessary administration of your existence.
But the Greeks recognize that administrating your existence is not the same as experiencing the profound depth of it.
And for that depth, they use the word Zoe.
Explain Zoe, because I want to make sure I am not just reducing it to a feeling,
Right. Zoe is intensive life. The framework defines it as life as an absolute principle.
Like life in its purest form.
Exactly. In the theological context, Zoe is life as God experiences it, unbound by the anxiety of decay. It is not about maintenance. It is about pure, unadulterated vitality and essence.
If bios is the mechanical structure of a piano and the tuning of the strings,
Then Zoe is the music that is actually played on it,
oh, that distinction clarifies so much modern psychological friction.
doesn't it?
Because when you talk to people today, so many of us are utterly exhausted, not because we are failing at bios, but because we are succeeding at it and still feeling empty.
You can crush the bios game. You can have the perfect 401k, eat a phenomenally balanced organic diet, maintain a pristine house.
You can effectively manage your biological entropy. But if you have no Zoe, you are essentially just a perfectly tuned piano sitting in a silent room.
And that silence is what drives the modern existential crisis.
Yeah.
We have built entire societies obsessed with optimizing bios. We have apps to track our sleep, our caloric intake, our heart rate variability.
You are the most biologically optimized generation in human history.
Yet depression and a sense of meaninglessness are skyrocketing.
Right.
Why? Because we are treating the optimization of the machine as the final goal rather than the prerequisite for Zoe.
This brings up a massive question for the listener. If BIOS is just the biological maintenance, the tuning of the instrument, how does one actually access Zoe?
Like, how do we flip the switch from extensive administration to intensive vitality?
Yes, exactly.
The transition from BIOS to Zoe requires the introduction of a singular defining element.
Purpose. Okay.
The framework argues that true life cannot be experienced passively. It requires a driving objective.
And to illustrate the economics of this purpose, the text utilizes a deeply grounded agricultural analogy.
The analogy of the orange tree.
Yes, I want to build this out carefully because it completely shifts the paradigm of what we feel we are owed by the universe.
It really does. Imagine a sapling, an orange tree, being planted in a lush, well-kept garden.
The moment that tree goes into the soil, it inherently receives certain benefits. It gets the rich nutrients of the earth, it gets the sunshine, it gets the rain.
It benefits from the meticulous care of the gardener who prunes it and protects it from pests.
Right. In the terminology we've been using, the tree is receiving the ultimate BIOS package. Its extensive life is completely subsidized by the environment and the gardener.
And in a modern human context, we often look at those inputs, the food, the comfortable environment, the safety, and we say, this is it. I have achieved the goal. I am comfortable.
But the agricultural reality is brutal. The tree does not exist merely to consume those benefits.
The gardener did not plant the tree so that the tree could experience the joy of photosynthesis.
No. The gardener is making an investment. The tree might provide some pleasant shade for the yard or look aesthetically beautiful in the spring when it blossoms.
Those are nice secondary benefits. But the primary existential reason that specific tree was placed in that specific soil is to produce oranges.
Its purpose is to output fruit that sustains others.
And if we apply the theological lens to this, the stakes become incredibly high. Because nature, much like theology, is highly intolerant of a parasite.
If a system is taking in massive amounts of resources and outputting nothing of value, it is a net negative on the ecosystem.
You see this vividly in the teachings of Jesus, specifically regarding fig trees.
I always struggled with those stories, to be honest. The interactions Jesus has with fig trees are often deeply misunderstood because they seem out of character.
In Matthew 21, Jesus is walking, he is physically hungry, and he sees a fig tree covered in leaves.
He goes to it expecting fruit, but finds nothing but the foliage.
Right. He curses the tree and it withers. To a modern reader, it seems like an angry reaction to a plant just trying to exist.
Yeah, it feels like getting mad at a dog for not speaking English. The tree is just being a tree.
But you have to view it through the economics of purpose. A fig tree that produces leaves but no fruit is actively deceiving the ecosystem.
Oh, wow. It's deceiving the ecosystem.
Yes, it is pulling water from the water table, It is pulling nitrogen from the soil. It is taking up canopy space and blocking the sun from other plants.
That's all the bios consumption.
Exactly. But it is failing completely at its Zoe mandate. It is a biological dead end.
That is a terrifying metaphor for a human life.
It is meant to be.
Yeah.
This is further cemented by the parable in Luke 13. A landowner has a fig tree in his vineyard that hasn't produced a single fig in 3 years.
He tells the man taking care of the vineyard, cut it down. Why should it use up the soil?
But the caretaker negotiates. He says, leave it alone for 1 more year and I'll dig around it and fertilize it. If it bears fruit next year, fine. If not, then cut it down.
So the caretaker is essentially saying, let me maximize its bios. Let me give it every possible physical advantage, every nutrient, every drop of water.
Yes. But even the caretaker agrees that if the maximum bios does not result in the fulfillment of purpose, the existence of the tree is unjustified.
Okay, I have to step in here and represent the listener who is suddenly feeling a spike in their blood pressure.
I get it. It sounds intense.
Because when you take this agricultural economics of purpose and map it onto a human being, it sounds exhausting. It sounds like spiritual capitalism.
Spiritual capitalism. That's a fascinating phrase.
Right. Are we just supposed to be relentless productivity machines? Is the theology saying that if I am not actively saving orphans or writing a symphony or producing fruit 24/7, I am a parasite that needs to be cut down?
That is the exact psychological friction this framework addresses. And the answer is a resounding no.
Oh, thank goodness, because I like my naps. Is it a sin to just take a nap or go to the beach or enjoy a nice dinner?
The theology is not advocating for an exhausting, joyless grind. In fact, the framework explicitly celebrates the enjoyment of the physical world.
It does.
Yes. It acknowledges that we are meant to enjoy good meals. We are meant to travel and see the world, to date, to fall in love, to get married, to engage in hobbies. All of those things are fundamentally good.
Okay, so the nap is safe.
The nap is safe. But the critical distinction lies in understanding the architecture of your actions. Why are you taking the nap?
The activities themselves are not the end goal.
Exactly. They are the scaffolding. They are the fuel.
Let's break that down practically. How do everyday bios activities transform into a Zoe architecture?
Take the act of eating a meal. You sit down to a beautiful dinner. The biological function is to break down proteins and carbohydrates for cellular energy.
But the Zoe purpose is that this energy allows you to wake up the next morning with the vitality needed to execute your responsibilities.
Right. To be patient with your children, to do your job with integrity, or take a vacation.
The biological function is to lower your cortisol levels and rest your nervous system.
But the purpose of that rest is to break the routine so you can return to your community renewed, capable of offering fresh perspectives and higher quality help to those around you.
I see the difference. If I take a vacation purely because I want to escape my life and isolate myself in comfort, that is bios-consuming resources.
Exactly. But if you take a vacation so you have the mental bandwidth to come back and be a more present, loving partner, that bios is serving a Zoe purpose.
The framework points to the Apostle Paul as a masterclass in this kind of focus, right?
Yes. In the book of Acts, chapter 20, Paul makes a radical statement. He says, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only aim is to finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me.
That is intense. He is essentially saying his biological survival is irrelevant compared to his objective.
Paul viewed his bios, his health, his freedom, his safety, purely as the vehicle required to accomplish his Zoe.
He didn't want to live a long time just for the sake of breathing. He wanted to live just long enough to finish his mission.
And near the end of his life, in his letter to Timothy, he doesn't say, I successfully avoided danger. He says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith.
The vehicle had run out of gas, but it had crossed the finish line.
Exactly.
That level of clarity is awe-inspiring. Again, to play devil's advocate for the listener, Paul had a very specific, dramatic, historically world-changing mission.
He was a unique figure for sure.
Most people listening to this are not planting churches across the ancient Mediterranean while dodging assassins.
No, they're not.
The listener might be an accountant analyzing spreadsheets, or a barista pulling espresso shots, or a stay-at-home parent trying to get a toddler to eat broccoli.
Right.
If we aren't apostles, what is the grand, overarching purpose that applies to every single human being, regardless of their daily occupation?
That is the pivotal question that bridges individual circumstances with universal theology. The framework turns to the foundational texts of Isaiah, specifically chapters 43 and the letter to the Ephesians.
And what does it extract from there?
It extracts the core theological thesis of human existence. The overarching purpose for every human being, regardless of talent, intellect, or occupation, is to praise and glorify the eternal God, the author and sustainer of life.
To glorify God. I am going to be honest, as beautiful as that sounds, it can feel like a very abstract, almost corporate speak theological phrase.
I completely understand why it sounds that way.
Hey, like, what does glorifying the Creator actually look like mechanically on a random Tuesday afternoon? Does it mean I need to stop the spreadsheet and sing a hymn in my cubicle?
No, it is far more integrated than that. The Hebrew concept of glory, kavod, involves weight, significance, and honor.
Weight and significance.
You glorify the Creator by consciously recognizing and giving weight to the source of your bios. It is the practice of tracing every profound experience back to its origin.
Walk me through what that looks like in a mundane scenario.
Imagine you are drinking your morning coffee. The egocentric, purely biological approach is to just consume the caffeine to stimulate your central nervous system so you can get to work.
Guilty as charged. That's me every morning.
Most of us do that.
Yeah.
But the theological approach, glorifying the Creator, means you take a moment to realize the absolute miracle of that cup.
You recognize that a bean grew in soil thousands of miles away, was harvested by human hands, roasted and brewed.
Yes. And you have the neuroreceptors on your tongue capable of experiencing its complex flavor.
Yeah.
You consciously direct a profound sense of gratitude to the architect who designed the soil, the bean, and your nervous system.
Oh, wow. It's an intentional paradigm shift. It is refusing to take the mechanics of the universe for granted.
Exactly. When you fall in love, you don't just enjoy the chemical rush of oxytocin. You direct awe toward the Creator who possessed the genius to invent the very concept of intimacy and human connection.
When you excel at your job as an accountant, you glorify God by exercising the logical, mathematical faculties He embedded in your brain and doing it with deep integrity.
The text anchors this in 1 Corinthians 10.31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God.
It turns every mundane action into a conduit for the sacred. It connects the bios to the Creator.
And the framework connects this directly to one of the most famous statements Jesus makes in the Gospel of John, chapter 10. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full, or as some translations say, in abundance.
That concept of abundant life is vital. And it circles back to our earlier discussion of the Hebrew word hay.
Remember the living water, the current.
Yes. The framework links John 10.10 to John chapter 7, where Jesus speaks of rivers of living water flowing from within a person, representing the dynamic presence of the Holy Spirit.
So abundant life isn't about the accumulation of external mass. It's not about building a dam and hoarding a massive reservoir of water.
It is about being a conduit for a rushing river.
That is a critical distinction, especially when we look at how the world attempts to manufacture peace and abundance.
The framework provides a brilliant historical contrast here by bringing up the concept of the Pax Romana.
The Pax Romana, the
Right.
Roman peace.
Let me explain the mechanics of this because it is a brutal but perfect metaphor. The Pax Romana was a period of roughly 200 years of relative stability across the Roman Empire, starting around the time of Augustus Caesar.
But the mechanism of that peace is what matters, right?
Right. Rome didn't achieve peace through diplomatic compromise or mutual flourishing. They achieved peace through overwhelming, terrifying, mechanized violence.
They conquered, they subjugated, and they crucified anyone who dared to disrupt the order.
It was a peace born of utter suppression. It is the peace of a prison yard where everyone is standing perfectly still because the guards on the wall have crossbows pointed at their heads.
There is no war, but there is certainly no flourishing.
And we do this today, don't we? We try to build a modern Pax Romana in our own lives.
We absolutely do. We try to manufacture peace through external suppression and control.
The text explicitly mentions how we try to secure peace through ephemeral, worldly things. Hoarding real estate, obsessing over career trajectories, accumulating luxury cars.
Or building massive financial moats. We are basically building our own Roman legions to guard our borders, hoping that if we have enough money and status, nothing can hurt us.
But that peace is incredibly fragile. A market crash, a rogue medical diagnosis, or a betrayal by a friend, and suddenly your Roman legions are useless.
The walls come down, and you are consumed by anxiety.
Which is why the internal theological peace of Zoe operates on an entirely different mechanism.
The peace offered by the Prince of Peace is not circumstantial. It is an internal river. It flows regardless of external droughts or storms.
You possess the deep, unshakable consciousness that your existence, your family, and your ultimate trajectory are held securely in the hands of the Creator.
You aren't suppressing the chaos of the world. You are insulated from it by an internal current of divine life.
Okay, this creates a massive philosophical collision. If this incredible Zoe, this internal river of peace, this profound purpose, is readily available to humanity, why is the empirical reality of our world so dark?
That is the million-dollar question.
Why are our streets filled with misery? Why do so many people, even those who have successfully built their own financial Pax Romana, feel utterly hollow and unfulfilled?
The framework does not shy away from that reality. To explain why human beings fail so spectacularly at living, the author introduces what I believe is the most potent mechanical analogy in the entire text.
Oh, the wheel and the hose. It's so good.
It is raw, it is blue-collar, and it perfectly diagnoses the human condition.
I love this so much because it wasn't born in an ivory tower. It was literally born from the author observing a messy backyard.
Right, picture this scenario. You are walking through a yard, and over by the water spigot, you notice a garden hose wrapped up.
But it's not wrapped around a plastic reel you buy at a hardware store. It is wrapped around a highly expensive, beautifully forged, high-performance automobile wheel.
Someone took a piece of advanced engineering and improvised a tool.
Exactly. Now let's analyze the physics of this. Is the wheel successfully holding the hose? Yes. It is keeping the hose off the muddy ground.
But the framework introduces a concept here called desvio de function deviation.
Think about the massive intellectual and physical capital that went into creating that wheel. Metal just developed the alloy. Engineers tested it for structural integrity in wind tunnels.
It was vulcanized and balanced to perfectly carry a machine worth tens of thousands of dollars, safely transporting human lives down a highway at 80 miles an hour.
It is a marvel of applied physics.
It was designed with a magnificent high-stakes trajectory in mind.
And yet it is sitting in the dirt, slowly rusting, holding a green plastic tube.
But the real tragedy is the second-order effect.
Right, because that incredibly capable wheel is sitting in the mud, holding a hose. The powerful engine of the car it belongs to is sitting on cinder blocks, completely useless.
The vehicle cannot fulfill its purpose because the wheel has chosen a lesser function. The wheel is experiencing total function deviation.
And from a psychological and theological standpoint, we have to ask why. Why would a human being equipped with the divine spark of Zoe, capable of altering the fabric of their community and glorifying the Creator, choose to sit in the dirt?
I think it comes down to the path of least resistance. Holding a garden hose is easy.
You don't have to endure the friction of the road. You don't have to bear the heavy weight of a vehicle. You just sit there.
Pursuing Zoe requires effort, vulnerability, and sacrifice. Function deviation is comfortable, at least in the short term.
It is a tragic exchange of ultimate purpose for immediate ease or temporary pleasure.
To anchor this in history, the framework turns to the ultimate biblical case study of function deviation, the life of Samson, found in the book of Judges.
If we're using the analogy, Samson was the equivalent of a custom-built, multi-million-dollar Formula One racing tire.
Without a doubt, look at his design specifications. He wasn't just a regular citizen.
The text points out that he was born with a divine mandate to judge and liberate the nation of Israel from the Philistines.
He was a Nazirite, which meant from the moment of conception, he was set apart for a holy, specialized existence. And biologically, he was gifted with superhuman strength.
He had every conceivable advantage. He had the ultimate bios and the clearest possible Zoe mandate.
And yet, he chose the dirt. Samson consistently distanced himself from his mentor, his creator.
He was driven by immediate dopamine hits chasing Philistine women, engaging in petty revenge, showing off his strength for parlor tricks.
He took his magnificent divine engineering and used it to wrap up the garden hose of his own carnal desires.
And the end of his life is one of the most brutal cautionary tales in literature. He is captured, his eyes are gouged out, and he's chained to a grinding wheel like an ox, entertaining his enemies.
He died a blinded, broken shadow of his potential, miles away from the purpose he was engineered for.
He died functioning as a beast of burden because he refused to function as a prince.
And the framework asks the listener to deeply examine their own lives, because function deviation today is rarely as dramatic as Samson's, but it is just as lethal to our Zoe.
Let's drag this out of ancient Israel and into the modern neighborhood. What does function deviation look like for the person listening to us right now?
The author provides deeply relevant modern examples. He points to parents who take the profound, sacred engineering of parenthood, the calling to protect, guide, and nurture a developing human soul, and deviate from it by drowning their health and their family's peace in alcohol.
Wow.
He speaks from his own experience as a teacher, witnessing the collateral damage of students whose parents abandoned them or became sources of terror due to addiction.
That is a violent deviation. You are designed to be a shield, and you become the weapon that wounds your own child.
The framework also lists the pursuit of legal or illegal drugs, but it doesn't stop at chemical vices. It calls out socially acceptable deviations.
Like what?
It speaks of individuals who sacrifice precious, irreplaceable time that should be spent watching their children grow, in the uncontrolled obsessive pursuit of vil metal, base wealth.
This is where it gets really uncomfortable because our culture doesn't call that deviation. Our culture calls that success.
We absolutely reward it.
If you abandon your family emotionally to work 90 hours a week so you can buy a massive house and drive a luxury car, society puts you on the cover of a business magazine.
But the theological framework is looking at that billionaire and saying, you are just a really, really shiny, expensive wheel, sitting in the mud, holding a very expensive hose.
You have completely missed the point of your engineering.
The author knows this is controversial. He anticipates the pushback. He writes that some might argue, this isn't dying. In my conception, this is living.
He respects the autonomy of different opinions, but he stands firm on the Christian perspective. Human beings, family, and eternal purpose are exponentially more important than possessions or fleeting pleasures.
What possible good is it to revel in a life full of money if your children perish emotionally, your physical health collapses from stress, and you compromise your eternity?
It is the ultimate bad trade. You are trading $1 for a penny and convincing yourself you made a profit.
To solidify this, the framework references the Apostle Paul in Galatians chapter 6, utilizing an agricultural law of cause and effect. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap.
If you sow seeds to your flesh, if your entire life is built on indulging your carnal desires, your ego, and your greed, you will reap corruption and decay.
The bios will break down, and you will have nothing left. But if you sow to the Spirit, operating in love and purpose, you reap eternal life.
There is a line in the text here that is profoundly countercultural regarding the length of our lives.
Yes, the author boldly states that living to be 70, 80, or 100 years old is entirely secondary.
The modern obsession with longevity, extending the bios at all costs, misses the point.
Living a long time is not the primary goal of existence. The focus must be on living an intense life, a life of quality, fulfilling your purpose entirely, whether you live to be 30 or 90.
As he writes, living is an art, and we need to learn this art before it is too late.
That perfectly transitions us to the great equalizer, the ultimate, unavoidable biological reality, death.
The machine, no matter how well we tune it, no matter how many green juices we drink or how optimally we sleep, will eventually power down.
Entropy always wins the physical battle.
How do the choices we make about our purpose, whether we lived as a wheel carrying a car or a wheel holding a hose, play out when the biological clock simply runs out?
To answer this, the framework introduces what appears to be a massive, unsolvable paradox. It is one of the most famous and difficult teachings of Jesus, found in Matthew 10:39.
Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it.
Right.
I have to admit, from a purely biological standpoint, this command seems insane. Biology dictates self-preservation.
Evolution wires us to put our own oxygen mask on first, to hoard calories for the winter, to protect our own genetic line.
Our entire neurological reward system is built to help us find and secure our own lives. How does theology reconcile this biological imperative with a command to actively lose it?
The reconciliation comes from defining what finding your life actually means in the worldly context. The author translates this brilliant concept.
He says that the person who finds their life in the negative sense is the person who lives an entirely egocentric existence.
He calls it a life centered completely on one's own belly button.
The belly button existence. It is the ultimate posture of navel-gazing. The entire universe revolves around my comfort, my bank account, my status, my pleasure.
And the framework argues that this biological impulse, when left unchecked by theological purpose, is a cancer.
Egocentrism is the root cause of the misery, inequality, and systemic failure we see in the modern world.
The author traces this disease through all levels of society. He points to ruthless business owners who exploit their workers without a shred of conscience just to increase profit margins.
And it isn't just a critique of the elite, right?
No, the disease is universal. He points to employees who defraud their bosses or perform their jobs with lazy indifference.
He points to corrupt politicians who siphon resources and bring ruin to the very populations they swore to protect.
He points to societies that hoard and waste mountains of food while their neighbors starve, rather than portioning it correctly.
All of this stems from the terrifying logic of the belly button existence. I must secure my bios, even if it destroys yours.
But the irony, the absolute devastating cosmic irony, is that all of this frantic hoarding and exploiting is ultimately futile.
Because the framework brings in the great scientific equalizer. In the final equation of biological life, it does not matter if you are a billionaire CEO, an exploited worker, a corrupt politician, white, black, rich, or poor.
Biology reduces every single human being to the exact same inescapable common denominator.
Dust.
Dust, the carbon molecules that make up your perfectly tailored suit and your incredibly fit body, will eventually return to the soil to be consumed by microbes.
Death reduces all human hierarchies to absolute biological equality. The bios inevitably ends.
So if the egocentric life ends in dust and the righteous life ends in dust biologically,
Yeah.
what is the antidote? How do you successfully lose your life to find it in a way that matters?
The antidote is the total inversion of the belly button existence. The author points to the two greatest commandments as outlined in Mark 12.
First, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is inextricably linked. Love your neighbor as yourself.
The framework insists that these two commandments cannot be separated. You cannot have vertical theology without horizontal morality.
The author proves this by citing the first epistle of John, chapter 4. The logic is piercing. How do we prove we love God? By loving our neighbor.
The text says that anyone who claims to love God but hates his brother is a liar.
It is a spiritual impossibility to truly love the invisible Creator if you refuse to show compassion to the visible, physical human being standing right in front of you.
Which brings me right back to the genius of the orange tree analogy. Think about the biology of that tree.
Yeah, let's look at it.
An orange tree goes through all the immense metabolic effort of pulling water from the deep earth, converting sunlight into sugar, and growing heavy, sweet fruit.
But the tree never eats its own oranges. Never.
Exactly. It produces that nutrition entirely for the benefit of the external world. It gives the fruit to the birds, to the gardener, to the children playing in the yard.
It expends its energy to nourish others. But it can only do this because it trusts the gardener to provide the sun, the rain, and the soil.
It trusts that its own bios needs will be met by a higher power, which frees it entirely from egocentrism.
A non-egocentric life is, by definition, a fruit-bearing life.
The author makes this connection explicitly. He states that we are meant to benefit from the rich blessings of the Lord, but the flow cannot stop with us.
We must take those blessings, those gifts, those talents, and use them to bless our neighbors. We lose our egocentric life to find our true, eternal purpose.
Okay, this brings us to the absolute climax of the source material. We have traveled from cellular metabolism to linguistic philosopher through function deviation and into the egocentric life.
Now, we reach the final theological reckoning.
And the framework does something incredibly bold here. It takes one of our most deeply held cultural idioms and completely shatters it.
It is a phrase you hear in almost every language on earth. You hear it in movies, you hear it whispered at funerals, you hear it as a justification for spending money.
I'm going to say it directly to you, listening right now. You have said this, and I have said this. When we die, we take nothing with us. You can't take it with you.
There is a dark humor to it. You've never seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul trailer.
Right. We assume that death strips us of absolutely everything. But the source material throws a massive theological curveball and asserts that this saying is actually fundamentally unbiblical.
It is a staggering claim, but the framework backs it up with direct scriptural authority. It states unequivocally that we do take something from this world into the next.
According to Revelation 14.13 and Ecclesiastes 12.14, there is a currency that survives the grave. Our works follow us.
Works follow them. I want us to really chew on that because depending on how you live, that is either the most comforting thought in the universe or the most terrifying.
It is the mechanism of ultimate accountability. Ecclesiastes states that God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil.
The things we did in secret, the motivations behind our actions, all of it crosses the threshold of death.
To illustrate the magnitude of this, the author details the scene of the final judgment from two profound biblical texts, Matthew 25 and Revelation 20.
Let's analyze Matthew 25, the famous separation of the sheep and the goats, because this text perfectly unites the biological reality of bios with the theological purpose of Zoe.
The scene is cosmic. The Son of Man comes in his glory, sits on his throne, and all the nations are gathered before him. He separates humanity into two groups, putting the sheep on his right and the goats on his left.
And we must pay forensic attention to the standard of judgment applied here. The king turns to those on his right, the righteous, and says, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance."
And what is the reason given? He says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me."
Notice what is not on that list. He doesn't say, "because you perfectly memorized complex theological doctrines," or "because you attended the correct building on the correct day of the week."
The righteous are genuinely confused. They respond, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or sick and visit you?" They didn't even realize they were performing a sacred act. They were just living out of love.
And the king replies with the statement that redefines human relationships. "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me."
This is the ultimate synthesis of the framework. The final judgment is not a written exam on theological minutiae. It is an altruism test.
It is intrinsically, inextricably tied to how we treated the physical, biological bios needs of the vulnerable people around us.
Precisely. The judgment is based entirely on works of altruistic love. Those who extended their hands to their neighbor, addressing the misery of the world with generosity and compassion, are welcomed into the kingdom.
They lived a fruit-bearing life. In stark contrast, those on the left, the goats, are told to depart into eternal punishment.
Why? Because they saw the hungry, the naked, the sick, and the imprisoned, and they did nothing. They lived solely for their own belly buttons.
They hoarded their fruit, they sat in the mud holding their own garden hose, and because of that egocentrism, they are eternally separated from the essence of love.
The framework then shifts to the terrifying imagery of Revelation 20, the Great White Throne Judgment. The books are opened, including the Book of Life.
The sea gives up its dead, death and Hades give up their dead, and every single human being is judged, not according to their wealth, not according to their status, but according to what they had done, according to their works.
The author's conclusion here carries a deep, sobering weight, but it is ultimately a message of profound hope.
He summarizes the entire collision of science and theology by stating that biological life, our extensive bios, our metabolism, our physical bodies, inevitably ends in the dust. Entropy claims the machine.
But the intensive life, our Zoe, when it is manifested through actual works of love, sacrifice, and obedience to the Creator, possesses a different physical property. It actually breaches the barrier of death. It crosses over into eternity.
That is an incredibly beautiful thought. Our bios stays in the grave. The X-ray machine, the EKG monitor, the bones, they all stay in the dirt.
But our Zoe, the love we gave, the fruit we produced, the grace we showed, packs its bags and moves into the next life.
The author concludes his chapter with a deeply pastoral plea to the reader. He writes that it is entirely worth it to endure the friction of living a sober, godly life, practicing good and love.
A life lived intentionally for God, His kingdom, and the practical betterment of your neighbor.
Because if you architect your life that way, when your biological clock finally runs out and it is time to leave this world, you will not experience the terror of the void.
You will be able to face the end with the same quiet confidence as the Apostle Paul, knowing that a crown of righteousness is prepared for you. You will have nothing left to do but transition from the temporary bios into the eternal presence of the Lord.
What a journey. Let's bring all of these threads together for a final synthesis.
What Ozair da Silva Mota has done in this specific chapter is reveal that science and theology are not actually enemies. They are answering two completely different halves of the exact same grand equation.
Science brilliantly and necessarily explains the how of our existence. It maps out the cellular respiration, the thermodynamics, the physical reality of our bodies. It defines the boundaries of our bios.
But biology alone, without philosophy and theology, leaves us utterly empty. It tells us perfectly how the machine operates, but it cannot tell us what the machine is built for.
Theology steps into that void to explain the why. It provides the overarching purpose, the calling to reject the path of least resistance, to produce fruit for others, and it extends the divine invitation to experience Zoe, the intensive, flowing river of abundant life.
And as we close this deep dive, we want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought. We don't want these to just be interesting concepts you listen to on a commute.
We want you to take the ancient Hebrew concept of the flowing river, the analogy of the orange tree, and the stark warning of the wheel holding the garden hose, and apply them aggressively to your reality today.
Think about the mechanics of your daily routine right now. Take a hard, honest look at your calendar for the upcoming week. Look at the transactions on your recent bank statements.
Pay deep attention to the tone of voice you default to when you speak to your spouse, your children, or your coworkers. Are those the metrics of a belly-button existence?
Or are they the markers of a life that is actively producing fruit to nourish others? Are you operating as a finely tuned, purpose-driven engine moving toward the ultimate trajectory the Creator designed for you?
Or are you an incredibly expensive, beautifully engineered car wheel, sitting quietly in the dirt of the backyard, spending your one irreplaceable life just wrapping up a garden hose?
Because the uncomfortable, unavoidable truth is that the machine will eventually power down. That EKG monitor we talked about at the very beginning, the one showing that reassuring rhythmic green spike of biological life, will one day go flat.
Entropy will claim the BIOS. And when that biological machine finally stops, what exactly will be following you into the next life?
It is the only question that truly matters, and it demands an answer from every single one of us.
It certainly does.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the true nature of life and living. We hope this exploration inspired you to not just successfully exist, but to truly, intensely live. Until next time.